Dan Lanning made a statement on the field. Dan Lanning made a statement off the field, and I'm here for both of them.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, and part of the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much for making that possible. Thoughts on Oregon's secondary after their worst performance of the year in a game where they held USC under 30 points? Not bad. And areas that I didn't care for from Saturday. On today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. I use Game Time to get my ticket to the Oregon game tonight against Auburn in Las Vegas. Hope to see some of you there. But Dan Lanning goes and beats USC. It is one of the biggest wins since he arrived to Eugene, the same year as Lincoln Riley did back in 2022. I don't think I have to explain to all of you that Dan Lanning has been the far more successful hire of those two head coaches, and Dan Lanning is now 2-0 in the head-to-head with Lincoln Riley. So one made a lot more news than the other, and what Dan Lanning has done, it all materialized on the field on Saturday in a number of different areas, but I want to start with what he said, taking a jab at the SEC. Quote, "This conference is a really good conference. It's competitive. We didn't play Chattanooga State today like some other places, right? We competed," end quote. Now, there's a larger quote. You can go check it out. Press conferences, of course, on YouTube there. But I am so unbelievably here for Dan Lanning taking this shot at the SEC. A conference that he knows very well. Worked in it at Alabama. Worked in it while he was at Georgia. He knows the league. He knows how good the football is down there. However, this is a plainly, I am fully in support of him. He didn't have to say this. I don't even remember what the exact question was. But he knows what he's doing by saying this. And yeah, maybe it's just catering to Oregon fans a little bit. But what I appreciate about that remark is that in the context of the game that Oregon just played against USC, this particular quote is even more accurate. Now, I have never, nor will I ever lobby for the removal entirely of FCS games in college football, because financially there is an important component for those schools. And I'm also okay with teams having one game to kind of figure things out. I'm totally and completely good with it, as long as those games are played in August or September and never anything later than that. Because Oregon was without, at various points in time, Oregon on Saturday was missing their starting center, their starting left tackle, their starting right tackle, their primary backup tackle. They've been down their number one receiver, Evan Stewart, all year. The guy who became the number one receiver, Corey Moore, he wasn't there. The number two receiver, Gary Bryant, he wasn't there. All of those injuries kept adding up. It felt like a clown car list where the names just kept on cut. This guy's down, this guy's down, this guy. You look around and go, oh my gosh, who's playing wide receiver? The answer is Kenyon Sadiq, because he was maybe the best player on the football field on Saturday. I mean, Dante Moore's really good, but Kenyon Sadiq is a freakishly good football player, which makes it tough to keep him around for next year. But the context of that game happening as Dan Lanning makes this particular quote illustrates the point perfectly. How much better off would Oregon have been going into that game and coming out of that game as they go on the road to play Washington, who's a good team, in a rivalry game this week, if they had been able to rest all of those guys? Everybody that got dinged up. Poncho would have played, obviously, but Isaiah Worrell wasn't 100%. He wouldn't have played if they'd had a cupcake game slotted in right there. There's no way. What would he play for? And you can just keep going down the list and make this example. And Oregon's playing a knockdown, drag-out, physical, four-quarter football game against USC and picked up a statement win. So when I saw that afterwards, I thought, man, I got to chime in because I am so here for it. And the argument against it is completely and utterly ridiculous. Well, the SEC's a better conference and all that. Giving teams an ability to rest before rivalry week. By the way, they do this in the ACC, but the reason I'm not as critical of that conference is that the ACC doesn't pound their chest about how much better they are than everybody else. And in the modern era of college football, the gap has been reduced. The SEC is still a great conference. I talk about it all the time over on Locked On College Football. It's a great league with a bunch of great teams. The gap between the best in the sport and everybody else, not as big as it used to be. And SEC folks are really uncomfortable with it. They cannot handle it. The SEC has failed to even make the national title game in each of the last 2 years. We'll see what happens in this year's playoff. They got teams that could do it. I could see them missing it again, and I would be totally here for it. So, did Dan Lanning have to take that shot? Nope, he didn't. Do I think the premise of what he's saying is correct? Absolutely. By the way, if you didn't know, the SEC is going to 9 conference games next year. You know why? Because the rest of college football is going, dude, you got to knock this off. And to be completely and totally fair, every other conference is mandating or has teams playing a Power 4 non-conference opponent. The Big Ten should do that as well. I'm 100% on board with that. What Indiana has done with their schedule, it's not good for the sport. So anyway, I just wanted to opine. Speaking of the USC game, I got a Spencer scale of agreement, which I get plenty of course. YouTube comments, Twitter, DMs, you guys know how to get in touch with me by now. I hope, if you're new here, welcome, and thank you for being part of the show. SSA, that was the biggest and most complete win of the Dan Lanning era. I'm still putting Ohio State number 1. Felt that at the time, felt that in the lead up to the game, and then Ohio State went on to win the national championship. I think we would have said this about Penn State had the Nittany Lions not completely mentally cratered after Oregon beat them on their home field. Now, that win was up there. Like that victory, especially with all the discourse surrounding Oregon going into that game, for Oregon to play like that, and I hope enough people actually watched the game and realized, man, Oregon could have won that game by 20 to 30 points. They easily could have. They made too many mistakes. Credit USC. That's a good team. Oregon is better because they won by 15 despite making a litany of mistakes and overcoming some really bad officiating. So, which I'll have thoughts on later on the show. But the biggest and most complete, it's up there. I don't know how you could put it outside the top 5. I stand by the stakes of the Penn State game going into it, make that one a top 5 candidate. Ohio State 2024, I think you have to put the Big Ten championship game in there. But did Oregon play as strong a complementary football against Penn State in the Big Ten title game as they did in this game against USC? No, I don't think so. And as we'll talk about later, the defense was certainly far from perfect in this matchup. But yeah, I got to give that one a 4. It's not a ridiculous thing when you consider the playoff stakes. But most complete, no, it's still Ohio State last year. But this one would certainly be inside the top 5. I'd probably have it in the top 3. I mean, you got to think about, Utah a couple of years ago was a pretty big statement when Oregon went on the road. Game day was in town, beat the Utes 35-6 at a stadium where they don't lose very often. I mean, just look at Saturday's game for them. It's hard to beat them no matter what the style of football they're playing. But yeah, I give that one a 4 just because I'm so on the 2024 Ohio State angle of it, and the defense came up with a stop when they needed to, and the offense came up with a play when they needed to. But did Oregon play well on Saturday? Yeah, it was a huge win. Beating USC always feels really good for Duck fans, and that one's just no different, and heightened by the fact that you keep your playoff hopes in your own control, and you knock USC out of the playoff. So most satisfying win, I might give that a 7.5. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter at LockedOnDucks or at SMcLaughlinCFB. So a couple of thoughts on the offense. But first, what should we feel about the Oregon secondary? First, this episode brought to you by Wayfair. The holiday season right around the corner. That means it's time to get your home ready. Whether you need more seating for guests, cozy new linens, or fun serveware for holiday hosting, Wayfair's Black Friday sale is here to help you make your space shine. And the best part, you don't have to wait. Wayfair's Black Friday deals are happening all month long with up to 70% off everything from sofas to spatulas. 70% sign. That's how much you can get off. So if you want to host a holiday party, you want to knock it out of the park, but when you host a holiday party, Thanksgiving, Christmas, whatever else you celebrate, guess what? You got to give it a feel. It has to have that warm, cozy holiday feel. Beyond just the food, Wayfair's here to help you do just that. Don't miss out on early Black Friday deals. Head to wayfair.com now to shop Wayfair's Black Friday sale for up to 70% off. That's WAYFAIR.com. Sale ends December 7th. Check out Wayfair today. I've had blue mystery liquid before. That was pink mystery liquid. Just changing it up for the second segment sip. That's all. Let's talk about Oregon secondary. So, worst game of the year. Jaden Mayava goes for 306 yards on 43 pass attempts, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 7.1 yards per attempt. Oregon came in with the number 1 statistical pass defense in the country, and at Autzen Stadium, boy, Jaden Mayava went bonkers, right? Biggest takeaway after going back and watching the game, which I did, and might do again because it was a really fun game. I am not throwing out a major level of concern about the Oregon secondary. So, yes, they got beat sometimes. Yes, they committed some penalties. Yes, there were penalties not called. The worst play of the day at the end of the first half didn't end up leading to points because the guy misses a chip shot field goal for USC. Tanook Hines beats Brandon Finney. And you go back and watch the broadcast, they say, yeah, Brandon Finney fell down. Fell down or was pushed to the ground? I don't know. There's an extension of the right arm, and suddenly then Finney's going down even though he was in position. It just looked like he was pushed to the ground. But hey, that's just me. What do I know? I'm casual knower of ball, just a hothead with a microphone, right? So that was the worst play of the day. The other worst play also came in the first half, and was a 24-yard touchdown from Mekhi Lemon to, I think it was Tanook Hines as well that made the catch. He's a freshman, by the way. Looks like he might be the next really good receiver for USC once Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane go to the NFL. So on that particular play, and I pointed out last week that USC doesn't use trick plays for fun. They use it to actually score. And boy, heck of a throw from Mekhi Lemon, man. I've seen some FCS programs across the country that might have Mekhi Lemon come play quarterback for him. Just throwing it out there. Like, that's a heck of a throw. When a guy makes a play like that, as Hines did, Aaron Flowers is all over him. He doesn't interfere. Hines high points the ball better than Flowers does. I don't watch plays like that and think to myself, oh man, secondary is just not good enough. Like, no, sometimes you tip your cap. Guy made a good play. Like, if you're, my golfing audience out there will understand this. If you're playing a match against a guy, you come up to short par 5, say it's 500 yards, even. You pipe your drive, he pipes his drive. You put yours on the green 25 feet, he puts his on the green 15 feet. You barely miss your putt on the right side. You tap in for birdie. He drains a 15-footer for eagle. Do you suck? No, you didn't play the hole poorly. You made a birdie. Like, guy made an eagle. That's just going to happen. So when you go against teams, and there are only so many in the country that have a receiving core that's on USC's level, when you go against NFL caliber receivers, it's advantage offense in football in those particular spots. Not just because of how it gets officiated, but just generally speaking. Like in basketball, you can play the best defense possible, and Kevin Durant might hit a really good shot. You can defend it perfectly. He's going to rise up and hit a tough fall away anyway. What are you going to do? You going to say that the guy defending him didn't do a good job, that he isn't a good defender? Or are you just going to say, yeah, guy made a play? Bottom line for Oregon, they held USC under 400 yards of offense. If I told you that going into the game, you would have been really happy. Mekhi Lemon had 7 catches for 34 yards and 2 touchdowns. That Hines is somebody that can make that caliber of play is a testament to what USC has done. And by the way, flip it over and talk about what Oregon has done with their receiving room. no DeCorian Moore, no Evan Stewart, no Gary Bryant. And Jeremiah McLaughlin goes down with an injury at one point in this game, and you still go out and go for 257 and 2 scores and over 400 yards of total offense? That's just a sign that the coaching staff has done their job to bring in enough talent to be able to survive when a guy is taken away. You think about, this is a good contrast because it's also a Big Ten example. Penn State last year, their passing game was okay. It was Tyler Warren, and then it was a bunch of receivers that weren't good enough. That's a fault of the Penn State coaching staff. If a receiving coach and an offensive staff in general have done their job at a program like USC or Oregon or Penn State or Ohio State, they're not reliant on one guy. So Oregon came in with a game plan of, hey, we're going to trust Brandon Finney to go one-on-one with Jacoby Lane because we trust our guy. And Jacoby Lane mostly got the better of him, got away with some push-offs, 100%. But also, some of Jacoby Lane's production didn't actually come against Brandon Finney. And we're going to take away Mekhi Lemon, which they did. I'm pretty sure this was Lemon's lowest receiving total of the year, other than maybe the Nebraska game. So I don't look at, and then that leaves Hines in one-on-one opportunities, and the guy went out and made some plays. And sometimes you just have to be able to tip your cap. That's just competition when you're going up against talented teams. Yeah, he had 2 catches for 18 yards against Nebraska. That was his worst game of the year. This was his second lowest receiving total of the season. I don't think that Oregon's secondary in any way, shape, or form, that also, by the way, came up with 2 interceptions of Jaden Mayava, and came up with the 4th down stop at the end of the game when it was on the line. Would have had another one if they'd called the push off on Jacoby Lane. We all know that just wasn't ever going to be the case. But he'd only had one other multi-interception game of the year, and it was against Notre Dame, and that was in a rainstorm. Jaden Mayava was playing at a really high level. And entering the game, I mean. And yeah, he went for 300 yards and such on 43 pass attempts. 7.1 yards per attempt. That's the sort of number that you might hear about from, those Husky troll fans on Twitter that want to jab Oregon about never taking shots down the field. Like that's not USC's offense at its best because of what Oregon's defense did. I thought the defensive line was more disruptive than the 1 sack indicated. Mateo Uyunglele starting to play his best football. His best game of the year was against Minnesota until USC. He'll definitely be one of my individual standouts tomorrow, without question. But, between the pass interference calls and the way the game actually played out, I didn't come away thinking, oh man, Oregon's secondary is terrible. Like, yeah, guys can beat you. That's football. That's competition. When you go in a big game like that, you could have a great secondary. Guess what? Jeremiah Smith's still going to beat you. Notre Dame had a great defense and a great secondary last year. Guess what? Jeremiah Smith beat him. Why? Because Jeremiah Smith is a really good football player. So I seriously did not come away after watching the game back again going, man, Oregon secondary is just getting beat. Like, nah. Maybe an officiating crew will learn what offensive pass interference is. Maybe they won't. But overall, did I feel like they played some horrible, no good, very bad game? No. I really, really did not. Wasn't their best. There's room to grow. There's always room to grow with young guys. And this was a good moment to learn, like, oh, okay, there's another level of receivers that we got to be able to stop. Because eventually you might run into Ohio State, and they're going to have those guys every single year, and you got to find a way to stop it. But frankly, the biggest way to take that away, to neutralize that ability for an offense, is what Michigan did to Washington in the national championship game a couple of years ago. They didn't win that game because their secondary was just, way better at covering than everyone else. They won the game up front. They pressured Penix, they got him off his spots, and didn't let him sit there and make accurate throws. But if you give a good quarterback and NFL caliber receivers time to make plays, they're going to get made. That's just the reality. And overall, I think Oregon did a fine job. Not great, but they did a fine job. So if I come up, I'll put it to you like this. If one of you sent me an SSA, what's your concern on the secondary? I'm sitting at a 3. I'm legitimately sitting at Jacoby Lane is really good. Tanook Hines made some big plays, and almost 51 of his 141 yards came on a play where he pushed off or Finney slipped, or a combination of the two was really what it was. And I don't think that's going to happen a whole heck of a lot. Guys are slipping all over the place. McLaughlin slipped. Finney slipped a couple times. Like, I'm not that worried about it. So now you have another NFL receiver up this week with Washington, and they got Denzel Boston, and he can make those sorts of plays, and it might happen. That's football. It's just, if you're going to bracket a guy, then you can take him away. And Oregon did that several times on Saturday against USC, and it was really effective. And I think that, let's save that for later. But anyway, those are thoughts on the secondary. Let me know yours in the comments below. So a couple thoughts on the offense and moments that I did not care for in this game. First, this episode brought to you by Game Time. College football has entered rivalry week, which is the best week to highlight why college football is better than the NFL. And I love the NFL, go Hawks, but you know what? College football is different because of this week. If you want to go to the Oregon-Washington game, if you want to go to another rivalry game that is in your area, there are a bunch of great ones out there this week. Game Time's the place to do it because you don't have to deal with things like endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. You want to use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. So, the day this show airs, Monday, November 24th, I will be in Las Vegas watching Oregon basketball play Auburn with my brother. Stoked to see the Ducks in person for the first time. Would be their biggest win of the year by far. I don't have that high of hopes, but you know what? I've been surprised before. Got the tickets on Game Time. You know why? Because the prices are better, the process is better. Everything you want in a ticketing service, Game Time has you covered. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, so really quick before I get to moments that I didn't think were handled correctly by the Ducks, and there were really just a couple. This was an incredibly impressive game from Will Stein and the offense. I know this is a controversial topic with some of the Oregon fans out there, but this was a big game by any stretch of the imagination, and Oregon put up 42 points whilst making several mistakes. Several. However, Will Stein called a really good game. I think I want to dive into this. Actually, I'm going to make a note right now to dive into this more tomorrow so that I don't forget, because sometimes I do that. But Will Stein, situationally late in the game, called a really, really good final drive. Now, that Oregon was able to do that without Decorian Moore, without Evan Stewart coming back, and without Jeremiah McLaughlin went out in the game. You lose 3 offensive linemen at various points. That they did that is seriously incredible. Absolutely incredible. Because they didn't do that against Minnesota or Oklahoma State. They did this against USC with your playoff hopes, season basically on the line. And those guys went out there and executed. They will be littering the individual standout segment I've got on Tuesday's show. But the way that the game was called, overall, it's really hard to complain. It's nitpicking against a team. USC is a real good team. Against a better team, these are the sorts of things that could wind up costing you the game. And I think we saw that when Oregon played Indiana earlier this year. So big picture, I think the biggest issue I had with the offense in the second half was the final drive was brilliant. And Oregon had chances to put the game away and to go up 3 possessions several times. Several times. Start of the third quarter, and I think 2 other times in the second half. They had a chance to break it open and feel like, okay, we've got this one. Barring some weird, fluky one-play touchdown drive for USC, they're just not going to have enough time. That final drive could have happened in any of those moments, and it just didn't because I thought Will Stein went away from the run a little. Not a ton. He didn't abandon it. But on the last drive, Oregon just lined up and really ran the ball right down USC's throats. They could not consistently stop it. And then in a couple of situational moments, he worked in a play action or a screen pass really effectively, and he called them at the right time. But that drive was sitting there for Oregon to have because of the way the O-line was playing. They could have had that at any point in time. And he saved it until it was a one-possession game in the fourth quarter. Definitely did not care for that. Now, the two other things that stood out from this game going forward. I actually didn't totally mind the 4th and 1 play call where Roger Saliapaga got stuffed. I minded that it was Roger Saliapaga that took the snap. And Roger played well against Minnesota, and he's their third tight end, has done well in that role. He's someone I'm sure I'll talk about in the offseason as to where he fits in that room, because I think he'll have a role in the offense going forward, especially once Sadiq, in all likelihood, goes to the NFL. He is not the biggest tight end. In fact, I believe he's the smallest. He was a wide receiver in high school. And he's not built the same way that Kenyon Sadiq is, and he's not physically as big as Jamari Johnson. So if you're going to run that play, which is distract the defense, make them think you're audibling, they let their guard down, and then you run up a tight end up under center and get off a sneak. First of all, you're doing that with a backup center. Don't know that I loved that. Charlie Pickard played really well, but that was the first thing I thought. Like, you had your backup center snap into your third string tight end. With 4th and 1 in the game on the line, that is not where I want to go. You've got Jordan Davison as an option. Kenyon, heck, if you want to run a Wildcat sort of set, fine. Do it with Kenyon Sadiq. That was the biggest problem I had there. Davison not touching the ball, especially the way the Oregon interior was blocking, the way they ran it in this game. Because who's Oregon's best offensive lineman when Poncho is on the field? As I've said all year, it's Emmanuel Pranon. Well, if you're doing quarterback sneak there, you're really relying heavily on the center. Your guards as well, but you're putting the focal point on the center and his ability to get a big push in that spot. If USC mans up and stops Jordan Davison, you know what? All right, tip your cap. But a backup center to a third string tight end, didn't love that particular call. The other thing that was sloppy in this game was the start of the fourth quarter. And, after shout plays in the stadium, I don't know how many guys were thinking about that too much. I don't suspect that it was very many, if any at all. I don't know what happened, but start of the fourth quarter to begin with a substitution error. And defensively, Oregon still struggles to adjust to tempo. They had a stop on the first drive of the game, but it was 12 men on the field and the drive continued. And then they struggled to get off the field. USC scored a touchdown. Now against the Trojans, they're able to overcome that. You do something like that in a playoff game against an Ohio State or Indiana, you might look back and say that was the difference. You can't do the small stuff. Other teams are way too good. USC is good, not yet great. But Indiana and Ohio State are great. And Oregon is still defensively struggling to adjust the tempo. That has to improve. So for that to have been an issue that early in the game, and then to begin the fourth quarter, you just had a big break, and you can't get the right guys on the field. USC then very wisely sees, hey, they substituted. We have to be able to substitute. When you do that, officials give you a ton of leeway with lollygagging around, so guys trot or borderline walk off the field, run down the play clock, and then the linebacker shoots the gap and it's a negative play. And then on third down, Dante Moore has it accidentally knocked out of his hands by Noah Whittington. Like, those were the things that if Oregon changes in this game, and that's not about what USC was doing. Now, USC was going with tempo, so you can view it through that lens if you want. But really, that was more about Oregon not doing some of the little things right that had a big impact on the game. So other than that, I don't really have the officiate. It's just, don't expect it to be good. I was frustrated, but not surprised at the way the game was called. I have been on this for years with college officials, not just that they aren't very good, but that offensive pass interference in their view just does not exist. It straight up cannot happen. And so that's unfortunate. So when you go against a pass-heavy team, yep, they're going to get away with it. Been watching it for years. And the NFL caliber wideouts in particular are really good at getting away with it. And they did. And the officials stink. And Oregon had 130 penalty yards. Some of that, they've got to clean up. Some of that, can't control what happens on the whistles there. So those were the things I didn't like about the game. But big picture, I'm like 92% happy with Oregon's performance. With all the guys they were missing, to win that game by 15 points, like I said to begin the show, statement kind of win. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.